An obelisk, from ancient Greek obeliskos, is defined as a tall, slender monument with 4 sides and a pyramidal top. Originally made by ancient Egyptians and called tekenu, the Greeks used the term obeliskos to describe them, with this word passing into Latin and ultimately English. During the course of history, obelisks have been an architectural reoccurrence over many cultures, each symbolizing something different, with many of them bearing inscriptions to commemorate either specific achievements or the life of important people. This is the meaning of the titular word from the YouTube series Obelisk. Created by Lizardmeninc. Obelisk is a mysterious horror series themed around liminality, changes made by time, and comprehension of the incomprehensible. In this video, I will be looking through every video from the Obelisk series uploaded to this date, provide my own commentary, and attempt to come up with a theory regarding the story behind it. But before doing so, I would recommend for you to head over to Lizardmeninc channel and check it out for yourself. It's a very short series, spanning around 20 minutes in total. I heavily recommend it to you, as it both makes good use of common horror tropes to deliver a chilling atmosphere while adding its own original twist to it. I think you'll be able to experience it much better this way, and we can discuss it here afterwards. Either way, the script of this video and the commentary related to each episode was written while watching everything for the first time, so you will also hear my first time reaction to it. If you're also a general fan of horror, you might want to subscribe to my channel, as I cover horror in a variety of topics ranging from stories, ARGs, and video games. And now, let's begin the video. The first video, titled Obelisk, My New Friend, begins with white captions on a black screen. I made a new friend. Do you want to meet him? He lives there. The video cuts to a room, filming what appears to be 2 closet doors. Can you see him? The video immediately cuts again. This time, we can clearly see that the closet isn't as empty as we might have initially thought. We see a face that quickly retreats in the darkness, as we are told that doesn't like being watched. Our protagonist enters the closet, only to find it empty, questioning where his new friend could have gone. The video cuts again, this time to a living room, as the author is apparently watching old cartoons on television. He lets us know that his friend is here, and he proceeds upstairs, once again asking whether we can see his friend or not, before we are transported back in its room, this time allowing us to see his friend in greater detail. The face appears vaguely humanoid, but the rest of the body is far from that. The creature appears tall, covered in either black fur or a cloak of some kind. We can also notice 2 limbs, but it's unclear whether those are arms or legs. In fact, the creature's size is unclear to begin with, as we cannot be certain whether part of it's still hiding in the closet, as it quickly retreats inside. And the video ends. Okay, so right off the bat, we are thrown into the sauce, so to speak. There's a few conclusions we can immediately reach after watching this video. The first one is that the creature in question appears to be a supernatural one, seemingly capable of appearing and disappearing within the protagonist's closet. One of the commenters pointed out that the protagonist constantly asking us, the audience, whether we can see the creature or not, almost appears as if he is seeking some form of validation, trying to see whether the creature truly does exist or if he is simply losing his mind. There have been a few instances of the author asking whether we can see the creature while there was nothing there, but the creature's existence is confirmed due to its multiple appearances. The other times it could be attributed to the low quality of the camera recorder not being able to properly capture the creature in the dark, or to the protagonist losing his mind and beginning to see his friend even while there's no one there. I think the wording here is rather important. The protagonist claimed that this creature is his new friend and that it doesn't like being watched. Despite that, he boldly enters the closet with almost no hesitation, suggesting that the creature might not be hostile or aggressive in nature. He's been familiar with its presence for what appears to be a while now, enough to know what it likes and dislikes. It likes watching television. It dislikes being watched. Is this perhaps a case where the creature itself is more afraid than the person? We'll have to keep watching to find out. Episode 2, titled Obelisk, You're Almost Gone, starts with what appears to be the camera recorder abandoned on the floor, filming a hallway, as a creature soon appears on screen. The creature's face is censored, but we can recognize that, at least from its limbs, it appears to be the same creature from the first episode, and we can assume that its face was censored, perhaps as a sort of kindness from the author, as it has already stated that it doesn't like being watched. But now we can more accurately determine this creature's anatomy, as we can see it standing upright. It appears far more humanoid than we initially thought. 2 arms, 2 legs, and a calm yet unnerving demeanor. We cut to the strange imagery of what appears to be a door leading into a hallway in the middle of the forest at night, like a portal of sorts, and we afterwards see 2 photos of another creature in the forest. This one appears still humanoid in nature, but much taller and emaciated. Its face isn't censored, indicating that this is definitely a different creature from the one we saw in the beginning. We are taken back to the hallway we saw at the beginning. This time the creature isn't there anymore, but the door on the left now appears to be open, indicating that it might have entered further into the house. We hear some noises. And the video ends. Alright, this is a far more mysterious video than the one we saw first. I would like to address 3 points. The first one is that we don't know whether this video was recorded by the same person from the first video. There is a lack of captions addressing the audience that might suggest a sort of continuity, and we're also unsure whether this is a sequel or a prequel. I do personally believe for this to be a sequel. You might be tempted to believe for this to be a prequel, attempting to shed some clarity on how the creature got into the house to begin with, but its face being censored leads me to believe for this to be a sequel, for the author beginning to respect the creature's wishes to not be looked at. We can safely assume that the creature came from the forest through that portal in the door we initially see. When we are taken outside of the hallway and into the forest, we can see a door on the right, which will technically match the positioning on the door on the left that we see at the beginning and at the end. It's hard to tell whether that's the same door due to a lack in quality, but I think it's safe to assume for that to be the case. The last point I'd like to address is that we have now been made aware of the existence of at least another creature, the tall one. No question comes up to my mind. Is this portal of sorts something that the friend was able to create itself? If so, that would explain how it was able to seemingly vanish from the closet the first time around. Once again, we are left with more questions than answers. Episode 3, titled Obelisk, in Your Home, is a peculiar one compared to the 2 we've just seen. It appears that the direction for this episode to have changed. This time the perspective we are offered is not one of a tape from a camcorder, rather a first-person perspective of an unknown character in a video game-like environment. The protagonist wakes up as we hear discomforting cries in the distance. And receives its objective. Check on Abby. The chair whose purpose was to barricade the door, perhaps a safety measure while sleeping, is removed, and our character begins walking around the house. He reaches what appears to be Abby's room, and instead we find an empty crib. Abby is gone, and something is now standing in the doorway. We are offered an additional perspective, this time from what will be perhaps a security camera, a baby monitor, it's unclear. But we can now see the creature from before once again standing in the doorway as a text appears. The doors were locked. Now, it's been 3 episodes so far, and we've already had 3 different creatures show up. I'm not sure whether they will be recurrent or not from now on, but for the purpose of clarity, I will refer to them as the Friend, the Tall One, and the Black Jester. The Black Jester is an interesting creature. I think the most striking aspect is definitely its design. A face distorted almost in confusion and wariness, wearing what appears to be or resemble a jester's hat, colored in black. While it is essentially just following the trope of a distorted human, I feel like it also strays away from the general designs that we often see in analog horrors of humans with distorted facial features, large gaping mouths, or unnaturally long smiles. The design is not attempting to evoke immediate dread, rather a sense of mystery and confusion. In terms of pure graphical designs, I'd say this has to be one of my favorites for an analog horror monster, and it looks deeply unsettling. Regarding this episode particularly, there are 2 major implications. The first one is that when the episode begins, we can see that whoever the protagonist is had its door already barricaded, indicating that they were already aware that something was in their house. That, or the fact that they might suffer from extreme paranoia, which also raises the question as to why will they barricade their door and yet leave a baby, Abby, which I assume is short for Abigail, unguarded, indicating that they might not be a parent, and Abigail might be more like a sister rather than a daughter. The second implication comes from the final text. The doors were locked. Now, this is a bit of an odd one, right? Because it could actually imply multiple things. Is this referring to the entrance doors? If so, that will mean the Black Jester was either in the house long before the doors were locked, hiding somewhere, or that he is perfectly capable of teleportation, or creating these portals that we saw previously, just like the Friend. Or does that text refer perhaps to some kind of aftermath, that the Black Jester locked the door itself after potentially taking the baby? Perhaps this phrase is meant to suggest that after its appearance, the doors were locked and the character was unable to escape from its grasp. Well, maybe the next episodes are going to shed some light on this mystery. Episode 4, Obelisk, the house with no windows, could potentially be the most interesting one in the series so far. Being over 8 minutes in length, it should provide the most exposition so far compared to the other episodes. Let's check it out and see what happens next, and whether we can find some answers to our previous questions. The episode begins in the traditional style of the other episodes, abandoning the video game-like perspective from before and back onto the perspective of a found footage type of recording. It starts with an unnamed character finding a strange house in the middle of a field. The house is tall, yellow with a red roof, but it presents no entrances whatsoever. There are no windows, no doors. The protagonist manages to find a passage through a crawl space beneath the house, and after crawling beneath for a while, he enters the house. The first thing he finds to comment about is that the inside smells like burnt matches. As the protagonist keeps exploring, he finds an odd room with the furniture placed upside down. Although the presence of what appears to be a water sprinkler on the ceiling and an electrical outlet near the floor appears to suggest that this was not the initial design for this room, and that the furniture might have been simply glued or attached to the ceiling at a later date. This, combined with the house lacking any doors or windows, feels heavily inspired by Lizardmeninc. After proceeding through the tall door, our character is faced with a choice: going left or forward. Almost hesitant to go left first, almost as if dissuaded by the dark hallway, he turns around. That was the friend, or at least appeared to be. The design looks fairly similar, and the way it kind of perched from behind the wall is also reminiscent of its behavior. It appears that our protagonist is not alone in this strange house. He proceeds through the hallway on the left, and we can already recognize this location, along with the door, as the same hallway from episode 2. He finds another room, just as odd as the rest of the house, presenting various pieces of furniture arranged with no clear intention, and the sign reading, "Be still, and know that I am God." The video cuts briefly, and the character continues exploring the rest of the house, finding another hallway leading to a doorframe with a cross hanging over it, and a stairway behind the doorframe leading to nowhere. The next find in the house is a door located a little too far up than one would expect, rendering it, at least without some sort of support such as a ladder, inaccessible for the moment. The video cuts once more, and this time we are taken to the hallway where we first catch a brief glimpse of the friend the first time. He's also there. Captions appear on screen, but this time the words are written in red, indicating that perhaps this is the friend itself speaking. "What are you?" he asks. "I know your face," he continues. And the episode ends. Okay, so I think there is definitely a lot to unpack it here, so let's take things one by one, starting with the house. First of all, this appears to be the same house presented to us in the second episode. I'm unsure whether this location bears any connection to the house from the first and third episode, as not every room has been explored, so it's difficult to draw a solid conclusion. Of course, the house from the third episode had windows, at least the one from Abby's room, but the overall layout also appears to be different. But I will say that this is most likely the house from the first episode, now inhabited just by the friend, perhaps modified by it to be more suitable, as indicated by the very tall door or the one placed higher up, which for him will be perfectly reachable. The entirety of the house, though, appears to make little sense. Maybe it's just me, but the outside appears far smaller than the actual size on the inside. Speaking of the outside, there is a detail that I missed on the first time watching this, but at the beginning of the video we can actually notice in the distance what appears to be an obelisk, which quickly disappears as soon as it goes off camera, something that our protagonist does not comment upon, indicating that perhaps the obelisk's presence might be visible only on the camera for a brief moment. I think it's also worth mentioning here that the word obelisk by definition can be used as another term for obolus. According to Wikipedia, an obolus, or oboli for plural, is a term used to refer to a historical annotation mark that can be represented by a division sign, a commercial minus sign, or more importantly, a dagger or a cross, which historically had a variety of uses, including to indicate death, something that could be hinted by the presence of the cross, or better yet, the obelisk, in the house. The protagonist in question I believe to be someone we haven't observed the POV of until now. This appears to be an adult, judging by the relative size of the rest of the furniture around him, and the comment regarding the door being very tall, as for a child, any door might appear tall. The protagonist from the first episode was most likely a child, indicated by the fact that he was watching cartoons on the television and the presence of two stuffed animals in its room. There appears to be some religious themes in this episode, as implied by the sign we first read and the crucifix hanging above the doorway. Someone in the comments interpreted the cross hanging above the doorway leading to a stairway that leads to nowhere as a metaphor for heaven being unreachable. While I do like this interpretation, I'm unsure how this plays into the overall story. If you have any ideas, let me know down in the comments. So let's talk about the final part, which I believe to be the most important. The friend speaks to the protagonist for the very first time, indicating what is essentially sentience and completely taking out the possibility of this being just a mindless beast. I think the first question, "What are you?" makes a lot of sense. Consider the context for a moment. This time around, it is us who intruded in this creature's house. It has displayed no signs of aggression so far, actually indicating a certain degree of fear the first time it was seen, quickly retreating back into the hallway, almost as if simply attempting to observe or study the person who has intruded into what now appears to be its house. The next sentence, "I know your face," is even more interesting, indicating that if this is perhaps the friend, the protagonist may in fact be the child from the first episode, but now grown up as an adult, explaining the friend's uncertainty and why it will first ask, "What are you?" Of course, this raises more questions. If this is the child from the first episode, what happened to them until this point? Why don't they recall their house, their friend? And what happened to the house altogether? We see it is now found without windows nor doors in a remote location, and yet electricity still seems to be working. And what's the deal with the obelisk that we briefly see outside? As in general analog horror fashion, this episode simply creates more questions than answers. Outside of that, I do have to praise Lizardmeninc for the quality of this episode in particular. The environment was highly detailed, and if not for this surreal nature, the first time I might have easily believed that this was filmed in live action rather than being an animation. While the interior of the house is impressive, I personally like the visuals outside more than anything. The grassy field, the lone windowless house, the obelisk in the distance, it creates a surreal liminal scenery, which I'm personally a huge sucker for, and also makes me believe that this series is still, despite having over 2 million views, still very underrated. Episode 5, Obelisk, Why Do You Keep Us Here?, is the next installment in the series. The video appears to return to this video game-like point-and-click type of style, indicating that this time the story might be presented from the point of view of the character from episode 3. We start in a graveyard, during the day, a brightly lit environment, something unusual for this series, which immediately creates a contrast between this scene and everything else we've seen so far. As the protagonist navigates the graveyard, they find a cradle, the same baby cradle where Abigail was supposed to be in. Instead, there is a caterpillar now. The shape of the Black Jester's head shadow begins looming over us as the video cuts. "You're not how I remember you, Abby." We wake up from what appeared to be a dream or a vision in the same room where episode 3 ended. This time the Black Jester is not anywhere in sight. There is blood on the floor, and the doorway leads to an empty triangular space. Looking out of the window, a question arises. Why do you keep me here? Is this question directed to the Black Jester, to Abigail, or to some other entity? A distorted song begins playing, and we hear soft cries in the distance. It's time to go. As we navigate the house, we see the Black Jester once more, standing in the doorframe opposite to us, as we quickly shut the door and go back to our room, barricading the door with the chair once more, which prevents the Black Jester from entering. Please forgive me, and the episode ends. This episode essentially confirms that at the end of episode 3, the protagonist was never killed by the Black Jester, but the blood on the floor might suggest that they were, at the very least, wounded or beaten, probably enough to pass out and have that dream we saw, the one in the graveyard. So it is clear by this point, what is happening isn't just random. There is definitely a story behind these episodes, but it appears that we've been put right in the middle of it. We cannot determine how all of this began, and we still don't know how it's going to end. It should be clear by this point that the protagonist in the episodes has been living with the Black Jester for a while. He or she is being kept inside of the house, not allowed to leave, as suggested by the titular phrase, "Why do you keep me here?" And yet, the title of the video differs, changing the me into us. Why do you keep us here? I think the us is particularly interesting. It indicates that there are multiple people being kept in the house. While this could be obviously referring to Abigail or Abby, we still have yet to see her. The character makes no effort to look for Abigail, nor does it raises any questions regarding its assumed disappearance. Rather, they simply calmly walk back to their room, barricade the door, and attempt to go back to sleep, doing their best to ignore the pleas and cries of whoever it is, which we can assume to be the Black Jester, attempting to enter the room. I think that the phrase, "Why do you keep me here?" recontextualizes the phrase at the end of episode 3. The doors were locked. It will be fair the first time to assume that the phrase was referring or trying to point at the fact that the doors being locked shouldn't have allowed the Black Jester to enter, giving the implications that he was either already inside or found a way into the house without going through the doors. But now I'm more inclined to believe that the phrase was rather meant to point at the main character's situation, at the fact that they were, and currently still are, unable to leave the house, because the doors are locked. The phrase, at least, this is what I personally believe, was never meant to symbolize or hint at the fact that the Black Jester should have been kept out, rather at the fact that the main character was being kept in. Sort of a "you're locked in here with me" type of situation. Before forming an actual theory in regards to what is happening here, I would like for us to take a peek to the last published episode in the series as of today's date. Episode 6, Obelisk, You've Come Back. The episode begins by showcasing us a house in a rather isolated area. We're immediately introduced to a new art style by the author of these videos. The environment and the character are now depicted similarly to a children's puppet show, and immediately I'm drawn to make a connection of how similar this is to the style used in Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. We're introduced to two new characters, which I will name Bluebird and Redbird. For the first time, we're also experiencing actual voice acting.
How are things going?
The plot appears to be a pretty simple one. Bluebird is sad that its pet fish passed away.
It's just strange that he's gone now.
While Redbird attempts to console him.
I'm not quite sure, but some people believe that when a loved one passes away, a small piece of them can come back as something else to visit you when you're sad.
And then this happens.
I don't see why it'd be different for a fish. I'm sure he'd still want to come by and check up on you. Someone's at the door. Who would be out this late?
I would like to immediately point out how fantastic this moment was. The loud bangs on the door, the music suddenly fading away, and the uncertainty of both of the characters and the viewer at who could be behind the door, knocking in the middle of the night with such strength and urgency.
Hello? Who's at the door?
The music resumes, and Redbird goes to check, only to find a butterfly that makes its way into the house, and the episode ends.
It's a butterfly.
I think this was a particularly good episode, even if short. It actually might be one of my favorites so far. The puppet show style feels very nostalgic. Also, the midway point, where the door knocks and the music is suddenly interrupted, feels very eerie. The sudden interruption just shifts the tone of the episode to something unnerving. Everything suddenly feels unsafe, uncertain, only for the twist of having an innocent butterfly enter the house. I feel like there's a definite connection between the butterfly we see in this episode and the caterpillar from episode 5, but I can't quite place it. Perhaps the butterfly is supposed to represent Abigail, who has passed away or changed into something new. Change appears to be a recurrent theme in this series, as it's also mentioned in episode 4, when the friend asks, "What are you?" and then, "I know your face." So let's talk about this series. The Obelisk is overall a great series. It's deeply shrouded in mystery, and I think that we are still going to need a few episodes in order to paint a complete picture. So far, what we can mostly do regarding the story is speculate, at least until more episodes come out. I would really like to form a theory regarding what the story here is, and this is going to be a sort of a stretch and will most likely be wrong, because there isn't much to work here to begin with, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway. Who knows, maybe this is going to be confirmed once the whole story comes out, and it'll feel like winning the lottery. Either way, my guess is that the characters that we observe the story's POV from live in a universe populated by a variety of different creatures coming from these woods, located in a sort of separate dimension. These two dimensions are now essentially overlapping, and the cause of this is the obelisk that we see in the episode 4. No real reason for me saying this, call it like a hunch or something. Either way, this obelisk, which I assume draws from like a Lovecraftian eldritch theme, is causing these dimensions to overlap, and now these creatures are starting to access this world. The creatures themselves are not extremely intelligent, or rather they don't know themselves exactly what is going on. Doorways have opened in their home, leading to other homes, and now curiosity is causing them to explore our world and interact with humans, some in different ways than others. They don't understand humans. To them, we are just as alien and mysterious as they are, but they are trying to understand us, each in their own way. The friend from episode 1 and 4 takes merely the role of an observer. He hides in this child's home, in his closet, returning to the woods whenever the child attempts to approach him, as he is uncertain of what the child's intention might be towards him. He studies the child, peering from around the corners, observing its sleep, and sometimes watching television alongside him, trying to understand what a television even is to begin with. He takes this role of a passive observer, attempting to limit his interaction, but still driven forth by curiosity, a curiosity born maybe out of fear of humans. The Black Jester, on the other hand, took a whole different approach. He invaded or entered a different home than the one of the child in which the friend resides in, and locked its residents inside, sort of like a zoologist finding a new animal and keeping it into an enclosure, subjecting it to various stimuli in an attempt to understand it. It even went to the length of straight up abducting one of the humans, Abby, a baby, and possibly killing it. Whether that was intentional or not is up to debate, but I think that Abby was killed, and that is meant to be represented by the dream or the vision from episode 5, where we see Abby as a caterpillar, and then in episode 6, after the two birds talk about what death means and how the dead will sometimes return as something different, we see this butterfly enter the home. I think that is meant to symbolize that Abby has been killed or underwent a sort of irreversible transformation, with the butterfly meant to symbolize either Abby's transformation or to simply represent Abby's soul. I'm excited to see how this series is going to continue, and I hope to see more of Lizardmeninc's original designs for monsters, as I think that is the greatest appeal of the series so far was its visuals. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more similar content, and leave a comment to let me know your thoughts on this one. As always, I'd like to thank this channel's members for supporting me and my content. It's highly appreciated, and if you'd like to support me as well by becoming a member, you can do so by clicking the join button down below. With this being said, I will see you around. I hope you have a good night, and bye bye.